So, hi, Tammy. Thanks so much for taking time to speak with me today. Before we jump into a few questions I have, I just want to sort of set the stage and some context for our conversation. So, Tammy is a shareholder of a small wholesale distributor here in Canada, who also just coincidentally happens to have a really great background in IT, so can help the company out when need be. Now, unfortunately, exactly a week after her IT consultant that built the IT network retired, they were hit by a ransomware attack, and the company was brought to a complete standstill. So Tammy's company's network is monitored by an IT MSP, or a managed service provider. They use a monitoring tool that's supplied by a company called Kaseya. And essentially, it's a small piece of software that goes onto all the servers and workstations in the company. And there were holes apparently that were known about in Kaseya, and some hackers, presumably Russians, used those holes to their advantage and breached the network at Kaseya. So in essence, there's a waterfall effect in that Kaseya got hit by the ransomware attack, which then hit Tammy's MSP provider, which then brought the company to a standstill. So yeah, Tammy, just jump in here. Like, how did you know that your network had been compromised? How did this whole thing come to light?
Well, it was Friday afternoon, July 2nd, just before the long weekend. I was off for the day, and I got a phone call from our operations manager saying everything had ground to a halt, and they had tried calling our managed service provider and they weren't answering the phones, and he was looking for advice on what he should do. And I jumped on my computer and found that all of our files on all of our shared folders were completely encrypted. We couldn't open them. Our main application stopped working. Our access to the network stopped working. We were basically ground to a complete halt.
Wow.
Yes.
And so before the breach, were you aware of this relationship between Kaseya and your MSP?
Yes, we knew that was the software they were using to monitor our servers and our workstations.
Okay.
We were well aware of it, but we were not aware of the fact that there were known breaches in that software. So
Okay.
one surprise was, why, if there were no breaches, why did any managed services provider continue to use that little piece of software? Because there are others out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So in hindsight, looking at the breach, do you think there was anything there that was user error? In other words, was there anything that a user did to initiate this or to start it off?
Absolutely not. But lessons learned for a tiny company. What we lost was our infrastructure. We had backups of our critical business data, so our ERP databases, and we had backups of all of the shared folders, accounting folders, IT folders, marketing folders, purchasing folders on our shared drive. But what we didn't have was backup of the servers themselves. We also had backups of user files, assuming they had shared copies on our shared folders, but anything that was just on their local hard drives on their laptops and desktops was lost. So what we had to do was, first of all, fail over our ERP from our on-site server to our software provider. Fortunately, we had a contract in place to do that. And then we had to call our managed services company to come in and help us rebuild everything from scratch. That was 7 servers and 30 workstations, and it was a nightmare. So wow. The biggest learning that we had coming out of this was we need a better backup strategy to include everything. It's always good to test your recovery strategy. Our users, as much as we encourage them to store individual folders on the shared folder, they don't always do it. So we need a backup program in place for the local drives as well.
Wow, tough lessons.
Yeah, it took about a month to get operational in an interim stage. So that was like by the end of July, we had all of our workstations rebuilt. We had all of our servers rebuilt, but we were still operating our ERP in the cloud. Then I was leading the charge. I didn't sleep for a month. I took 2 weeks off for my scheduled holiday. And fortunately, the day I got back from holidays, we hired a new IT manager and we turned the reins of the recovery project over to him. And on October the 2nd, we will be bringing our ERP back in-house. And at that point, we will declare ourselves recovered.
Yeah. Now, was there any time when the ransom attack folks reached out to you? Like, did you get any requests for ransom payments or anything like that?
Yeah, so how that worked, that was very eye-opening. So how did we know it was ransomware early on? So every file on our network was corrupted with 5 or 6 cryptic set of characters at the end of the file name. And you try to open it and you get a message saying, you know, this file has been overtaken. Read the README file in the folder of the document where you're looking. So you open up the README file and it says, we've got your data. If you want it back, click on this link and, you know, we'll negotiate with you for you to get your data back. So initially, when this happened, our IT service provider, the managed services provider, advised us to contact our insurance company, which we did. And they worked with us to, one, figure out how much coverage we actually had. We had some cybersecurity insurance, but nowhere near enough. And they also advised us that if we ever decided we needed to connect with the ransomware, the hackers, they would do that on our behalf. And what eventually happened, what we heard through the media was that the demand was 45,000 per device, which for us would have been 45,000 times 30 workstations plus 45,000 times 7 servers. But we never did get that far. Bigger companies would have had much bigger accumulated totals. So what we were hearing was they were actually negotiating more on a global scale rather than on an individual scale. And there was one point where we thought we were going to have to go to the ransomware attackers because we had 6 years of customization programming that we were having trouble getting restored from our software vendor. But we pushed and pushed and pushed until they went up to some backup tapes that actually had uncorrupted data on them, and we were able to keep going. So no, we never did talk to the hackers, and neither did our insurance companies, but it sounds like lots of other companies did have to resort to that.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. So terrible time. You were able to recover. Do you have any advice for any other small or medium-sized company? I guess any company of any size, just learnings from what you did.
Yeah, one is I believe you can never be prepared. You can't protect yourself from these attackers. They're going to get in because there's going to be holes down the road. We don't know about them today. So the most important lesson we learned was an effective backup strategy that is all encompassing, that is understood. Like in the olden days, you took a backup once a day. That's probably not good enough these days. You know, and you may have just backed up your critical data because there were data centers waiting in the wings to receive, you know, your backups should the need arise, but the world has changed. So I would say the most important lesson we learned was we need a top to bottom backup strategy, as well as a disaster recovery testing protocol. And I would think the biggest change we're going to make coming out of this is moving as much as we can off-site into the cloud, where that backup happens automatically and we don't have to worry about it. But we're not there yet. We're still trying to land on our feet.
Yeah, still recovering 3 months later.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Wow, that's quite a story and quite, you know, a scary thing. Yeah, but thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate your time and the story, and wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Gay.